Welcome back to the podcast. Got Marian Giannulis and Melissa Castle. This is the time of year when it's time to talk to Melissa about mountain goats. This is an, an annual occurrence now. So welcome back to the podcast, both of you.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jeff.
No, excited to be here.
Before we get started with the mountain goat hunt, I gotta ask a question about best pizza in Anchorage. I was on the Trout Unlimited forum, and someone was going up to Anchorage, and they were gonna have some extra days, and what should they do? And so rather than give them like a hey, go fish this area, I was like, you got to eat here and here. And I think that Moose's Tooth is overrated. I think it's fine. I think it's good. I think if you've been there once, then that's great. But like that, is it Hearth or well,
Yeah.
that I think that one is the best. Am I right or wrong? Or is there another one out there that's really good?
It is really good. Yeah, I would agree that that Hearth is up there. And my husband agrees with you that Moose's Teeth is overrated.
No, I have to fight you both on that one though. There was one pizza, one from Moose's Tooth called the Amazing Apricot
Mm.
yeah, that one is the best one. So if you haven't had that, gotta have that, and then we can talk.
What's
I
on
will
the
say I do enjoy them for a specialty slice, but like a standard like pepperoni or kind of classic pizza, I think there's better options.
what's on that apricot one? Apricot one.
Yeah, so it's like an apricot glaze. It's got a little bit of cream cheese. It's got some chicken, carrots, and cilantro and green onions. It sounds weird, but it is so good.
Interesting. Very unique, but sounds pretty good. And then best halibut sandwich. I'm not big with getting seafood outside of like my home, but
Mm.
is it F Street Station has a really good halibut. Is that the name of is it F Street
Yeah.
Station? Is that
Yep.
um exceptional halibut sandwich? I would recommend going there. So if I were to be downtown, I would go to F Street before I would go to was that 49th Brewing? Because
Yeah.
it takes 3 days to get into 49th Brewing. The views are awesome, but the food is just mediocre.
Yes. Agree. There's also a place called Altura, and Marian can attest to this because
Yeah.
they have a halibut sandwich that I think is a little bit better than F Street's. It's
Okay.
something about it. It's
Yeah.
really the next time you're gonna try, give it a town. Give it a
All right.
try.
Sounds like you have
Definitely.
infant brain or mother's brain
Yeah,
or something. Yeah, we
that's
were just
great.
talking just talking about that off air that with the infant my brain is just all over the place. They're mixing up words and whatnot. But all right, so glad we got that settled. So mountain goat hunt. How did this come about? Have you hunted before? How did this happen?
I have. I'm a relatively kind of new to the game hunter, I'd say. This is about like my fifth season hunting big game. And I drew a goat. I had hunted mountain goats previously with my husband under his tag. And so just had a little bit of experience and was really stoked to get out this year. And about mid-July, my husband and hunting partner, who I was planning to get out with this year, broke his leg. And it was very much a like, oh shit, he's, on crutches for 2 months. He's not going to be hunting goats this season. It's, early July by the time we get this news. Many of my friends who do hunt have plans, they have commitments. And as I was caring for my husband, was frantically trying to find, friends and family who could get out with me and who could commit to hunting with me when my tag was open. And I didn't feel comfortable getting out myself. And I was able to get out with my brother in August for a couple days. We had a great weather window for the first day. Found a beautiful billy in this valley we were in. We were planning out the stock, and then spotted some other hunters who were down valley from us, and got turned around. Had some shit weather after that. Didn't have an opportunity regroup and go elsewhere and had to go back out. And then I had to find somebody else who could get out with me later in the season. And so I hit up Mel, who's never wanted to say no to a good time. And we made tentative plans for later in September, which I was thrilled about, because I think honestly one of the best ways that you can get better at something is to go with somebody who is better than you and learn from them, and just take every second of that opportunity to grow your own knowledge and skills. And Mel is such a talented hunter. She's so strong and fast in the mountains. Like I was thrilled to be able to get out with her and have the opportunity to fill my tag with her. And we had plans for, I think, the second to the last weekend in September. And the weekend before, I had a fishing trip planned, and I got a text from Mel on, I think, Wednesday, and was like, "We have a weather window. What are you doing this weekend? Let's make it happen. Like, let's go." She had wrapped up her sheep season. Like she was ready to get after it. And so
Got some sleep in
yeah. So yeah, canceled the trip that I had that weekend, and Mel and I set off to try to fill that tag.
That's awesome. Melissa, what else had you hunted for? Because it seems like you're not the type of person to really have a free weekend, let alone the one you planned for, and be able to just drop and go.
Yeah, so my cousin and I, Brian, did a sheep hunt for the opener. In my head, I told Marian, I was like, well, the end of September, because my backup was like, well, if Brian and I don't get a sheep, then I can use the weekends until September 20th to get back out. But we got one, and then ended up buzzing down to Craig to help my parents get some halibut fishing done, and then started kind of watching that weather in that Seward area region for her goat tag. And Seward's kind of like Southeast Alaska. When it's rainy and windy, it can be challenging. So when the weather opportunity presented itself, I was like, all right, Marian, what are you doing this weekend? Let's get after it.
Yeah, I'd heard that the snow is a lot more wet, and the peaks are pretty extremes. Like all the whether you're talking about the Chugach, you're talking about the Alaska, the Brooks, like they're all very rugged in their own ways. But that southern range there is much just much more harsh, much more wet, and kind of socked in, like you said, southeast, but even worse.
Well, and they get the brush that, like, goes in the alders and the Devil's Club that goes halfway up the mountain, and then all of a sudden it's cliffs. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, I was excited too, because this area that she got her tag out of Seward was an area that I've wanted to go summit a couple mountains over there, and I haven't yet, still on my list. But I was just excited to get into new territory, and especially for Seward on a nice sunny weekend. I was like, heck yeah, let's do it in the fall time.
Perfect. So what was the planning like? Were you do you go individual stuff? I'm bringing all my own stuff, and you bring all your own stuff, or were you planning stuff together? Did you have two jet boils, sharing food? What do you do?
We went light. We went super light.
It was like, all right, if
Yeah.
we're gonna do this, we need to go light so we can get a whole goat out. So it was a lot of texting and planning around work schedule, since we planned to go last minute, that it was like, I think I said we had made some foods with our freeze dryer. So I was like, well, I'll bring the food if you got the stove, and then pulled out the chronic forever diehard list of hunting gear, and just checked off the list, and we basically went through everything together really quickly. And um she was like, well, we'll go, how about we go Saturday morning? And I was like, let's try to get out there earlier just in case, because I could see the weather was like, gave us this small window. And so even though she was really tired coming off of like 4 weeks of straight work trips, she was like, all right, we'll go Friday night. So we went right after work Friday and headed to Seward.
So we're gonna go back to about the food thing here. Were you nervous
Yeah.
at all when Melissa said that she was going to bring all the food? Because, I mean, if she's bringing in freeze-dried apricot pizza, for
Right.
3 days, or is she a trustworthy chef, I guess?
She is trustworthy, and she is married to a very talented chef as
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
You
So
know,
like they got
as,
that.
as we're saying this, my husband's over here making pasta. And you want to know
Perfect.
he made Dungeness crab with mushroom ravioli tonight with like elk strips in it in marinara sauce. So I told Marian that my husband did like a lot of the freeze dried meals, so she was all about it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. Excellent. All right, so and as far as planning goes, what was the mileage like, or did you have trails? Did you just download maps on X? What was the how are you going to get to where you were going to go, and how'd you choose it?
Yeah. So I decided to go back to the same zone that I had hunted previously, and I had also hunted that area when my husband had his tag, he did. And it was such a bummer to run into other hunters up there, but it also is an accessible place within the unit, and not trails. There was a creek crossing at the beginning that could be sketch or not, and then up the main gully, there's kind of a schwack trail that I had put in place early in the season, and probably some other hunters did too. But then once
Social
you get
trail.
up a certain point, you're just kind of moving through the hemlock forest down there, and it's not a super far distance, a couple miles, but you're gaining elevation pretty quick, and yeah, having to pack that up, and then we were able to set up camp kind of just below the tree line, in an open area that had a little bit of protection, and then be up to a place that you could glass from like a couple miles in.
Mhm. When we're looking at mountain goat down here, we kind of look at 3,000 feet in elevation as kind of being the line of, I guess, demarcation. Everything above that tends to be more mountain goat territory. Of course, they can be below that, but that's kind of the line you look at if you're scouting mountains. Do you have an elevation in mind when you're looking at these things, or is it above tree line, or what do you kind of look at?
I
I
mean,
feel
we
like,
were.
sorry, I feel like that was probably about where the goats were, wouldn't you say, Marianne, about that 3,000?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I mean, we're in a good position of glass at about 2,000 feet. Had seen goats on the prior trip at about 2,300, 2,400 feet, and then from above there and up to, yeah, probably 3,000, maybe. I mean, I'm sure they go higher up there, but then you're getting into like some real steep terrain in
Mhm.
those mountains for sure.
So, what time did you make camp? And then that first morning, what was that like?
Well, we crashed in Seward and hit the trail Saturday morning, at like
I think,
just before sunrise on Saturday morning, and we're able to make good time, get up into a glassing position at, I don't know, maybe 9 or so, I think.
yeah, right around there, like mid-morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's when we got to the camp spot that she had previously marked, we set down our gear and I was just like so excited to go find a goat. I remember she was pumping water and I like scrambled up and there was a lot of white patches of snow, but
Mm.
we saw that's when we saw the billy that we ended up getting, but we saw that one billy and he was sitting right up on a ridge and I thought, ooh, he's not in a easy spot. uh,
Oh,
yeah.
that's
But that's when we were able to drop our stuff for camp, and then we're like, okay, now we can go light our weight and get rid of some of like just have day stuff now, which was nice.
Mhm.
Guess what was that first day like? You drop off camp, did you go right after him?
Yeah, so we since Marion had already been in there once, we decided to go where she had seen two separate groups of goats initially up towards the glacier. And once we got to that bottom of the valley that we were working our way up, that would put us in a position where we couldn't see that lone Billy up on the ridge anymore, which was good and bad. He couldn't see us, but we also didn't know exactly where he was throughout the day. And yeah, we worked our way up to the glacier, and we stopped to have lunch, and I scrambled up just to get a different viewpoint, and for about 20 minutes, and I turn around, come back down, and Marian's talking to three other people.
Oh, wow.
Go ahead, Marian, on how that went.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, Mel, I'm like taking a water and snack break, and Mel scrambles up and I'm just, glass in the valley below, and I see like two people. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, are you kidding me? Again. But they're very brightly colored. I'm like, these definitely are not hunters. I pull out my binos. They've got helmets. I'm like, okay, they're climbers. And they're making their way, and then I see another person and a dog. Husky. I'm like, oh my gosh, like our spot is blown. So they make their way up to me, and this guy walks up and he like sees me like standing above him, and he's like, oh no, are you hunting? Like they're like camo, like rifle on my shoulder, binos on my chest. And he was honestly wonderful. He's very apologetic about it. His name is Timothy. He owns Oslod and Seward Mobile Saunas.
One of the nicest people you could have met in the
Oh
mountains.
my gosh, so sweet. He's there with two friends who were visiting him, staying at his lodge, and they're climbing the mountain we were on. And I'm chatting up with them, and Mel comes down and is like, what? But they were so friendly, and we're like, oh my gosh, I know like how difficult it is to get tagged here, like I'm so sorry. We don't want to mess this up for you. Where are you going? We'll go the opposite direction. And so we kind of game planned, and they went off on their way, and we went off on ours. And at that time it was getting a little bit later, and we hadn't seen that same Billy on the ridge, just, the vantage point of where he was, and where we were adjacent to that didn't give us sight on him, since that morning. And so we're like, okay, we're not going to make a play on him right now. Like we kind of made our way back down valley, to just continue to glass. And that terrain, I mean, it's, the bowl had a lot of just knobs, elevation to come up and back down over. And then the ridge around it had so many different vantage points that, just one or two could have been tucked into. So we made our way back down to just glass a little bit more and see if we could get eyes on him again before making a play on that ridge. And we end up going pretty high on the opposite ridge to see if we can get a better vantage point from that elevation. And we spot him again, and he's in the same spot. He was just like, not visible at all from where Mel had first seen him that morning.
It's interesting to see. You mentioned there's some other traffic up there. There's a draw hunt down here there are three very popular trails that are in that area, and it's almost like the goats get used to people. They don't get close to them. They're down off the edges, but they don't totally blow out. They might be a little bit more tolerant to people sometimes, and they can still kind of go through their normal routine, and they're not kind of getting out of the country. So it's kind of interesting. And I haven't really figured out, I haven't mountain goat hunted enough to really know about patterns or also tolerance for movement. So as you're kind of being around the mountain, as you're glassing and all that, are you really worried about how much movement you're making and how tolerant it's going to be when you decide to make a stock?
Yeah, so I mean, you're kind of leading us right into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when we spot him, again, and okay, we're trying to decide, do we have enough time to go after him tonight? Or is this a like how far away is he? And we also didn't, there was a section that we weren't sure if we could cross the glacier or go how to get to him. And obviously we wanted to get on top of him, but we were like, we don't know if we can do that. So as we're discussing on what we should do, we decide that it's probably not quite enough time to get to him tonight. And so once we made that decision, we were trying to make a route for the morning. And that's when I said, well, why don't I go scramble up back to the glacier with no pack and see if we can cross at the head of the glacier there, or the base of the glacier, in the morning for a plan. So we decided we're going to do that. So Marian said, I'll move our packs to this knob. Let's meet back there. And okay. So about 10 minutes into this split up, I look up and he's probably 3/4 of a mile away, I would say. But just as you could see him with your naked eye, but like it wasn't, he was a ways away. But anyway, 10 minutes into the split, I look up and this goat is staring at the edge, looking down into the valley. I thought, huh, he looks like he's looking at us. And sure enough,
He was.
I pull up the binos and I'm like, he's staring at me. Huh. Okay. So I stop and I watch Marian, and she kind of is looking at him too. I was like, okay, so she sees it too. And I was like, this actually probably isn't a good idea to go up towards the glacier now, because I'm going to go out of his sight, and that's probably going to make him nervous, like this movement down here, and now I'm going to go out of sight. So I kind of backtrack slowly, and he's watching us, and I go back to Marian, and she was like, yeah, he's watching me too. And so we decided, you know what, we're just gonna have to like go in the morning and hope that that glacier route works. And and we kind of, he watched us for a while, but then he settled back down. But you could tell he either one has been hunted, or two, like he didn't quite like that. But also, I guess this is also important information, is earlier that morning there was a bear up there, and a black bear. In fact, he worked his way right up the mountain, and he was probably within 400 yards of that goat, which I was
just scrambled right up the cliffs underneath him and popped up, and probably pretty close to him up top.
Which was crazy, because the goat, from when we saw him in the morning to when we saw him in the evening, didn't move that much. So didn't freak out the goat enough, but I'm sure made him very aware of the movement and everything going on in that valley. And then add 3 people and a dog. Yeah, he was.
Yeah,
he wasn't.
The radar was on.
Yeah. So.
So did you sleep at all that night?
I slept hard. Yeah.
We had a game plan, and we
an early start time.
Yeah, we were like, okay, well, now this is also a factor that he is like aware of all the movement in here. We should try to move in the dark. So luckily the weather was still nice, and we woke up, I think, at 6 a.m. and there was ice in the water bottles, and the moon was out, and the tent had frost on it. But we got our coffee in, and we started a hike in the dark in the moonlight.
So you went by moonlight. You didn't have headlamps or anything?
No.
I tried the red light for a little bit, and honestly, it felt like it was more difficult to see with that than without it. So we just went, and thankfully it was a nice clear night, and it was bright enough that we were able to make it all the way across the valley in the morning and get out of his line of sight before sunlight hit the valley.
Perfect. Yeah, people go back and forth about using either the cover of fog to make a move, or starting off early in the dark, because you could be stumbling over stuff, but you got to make the call that you do in that situation. Last year, my wife and I made a move on a goat in the fog, and kind of lost track of like where I was in relationship to where the goat was, and I thought it had totally taken off. And Abby said, "We've come all this way, just like look over the edge." And so I was, well, it's not going to be there. And I looked over, and it was like 15 yards from me. It was right
Oh my
there. And so the goat that I ended up getting, I was in a pissy mood, and I was about ready to just get off this
God.
mountain.
What up?
But sometimes it absolutely works. So some people say you never move in the dark, you never do too much movement at night because it's dangerous or whatever, but you just make the decision based on the information you have, based on how you feel, your hunting partners and the
Mhm.
conditions.
Yeah, and Mel and I had moved through that space the day before, and I had, on several occasions when I hunted it previously, so we felt confident about being able to move across it safely and quietly and then kind of got at a point where we were starting to get daylight, where we were getting into more consequential terrain at that point.
All right, so from there, what happens?
Then we get to the glacier. I think after this year, I think I said this last year too, but I need to take a glacier travel class because just growing
Yeah.
up in the East, don't have a lot of experience with that. So we get to the glacier and we start kind of picking our way among it, and we were doing good in navigating. We got to a couple like deep cracks where we had to reassess and then stepped into some unstable silty stuff that went up to nearly my knee in like a split of a second. And so I was like, ooh, this is not stable. So yeah, that was a little eerie. I didn't quite love that,
Do you have
but
crampons on or spikes or anything?
no, we probably should have, but we were able to get by without. But yeah, it
Yeah.
was yeah.
And we were far enough down on the toe that the majority of the ice that we were crossing had a pretty substantial layer of rock on top of it.
Mhm.
And then there was one crux where it was like we had to go a little bit further up on it to avoid some pretty serious cliffs. And yeah, like Mel said, there was one spot where there was an obvious water flow and some like larger crevasses up the glacier, and we just had an area of like a kind of short stretch that we were able to cross where it's like, okay, it's the cliffs to the right of us. Like we kind of walked the line of like cliffs to the right and glacier to the left of like, this should be pretty solid underneath us because we can tell, just a little bit further to the right, there's this big, rocky outcropping. So that felt okay, but Mel sinking above her knee in a second in mud was like, oh shit,
Mhm.
like this is,
Like
we thought it was solid
yeah.
underneath our feet, and then we're kind of moving across some larger rocks there. And I dip into some mud too, about halfway up my calf. And that was the extent of it, but that was a really like stark reminder of like the surfaces underneath your feet on glaciers are not what they appear.
Yeah.
So how much further do you have to go to get to the goat?
So we crossed the glacier and now we're probably 1,000 yards from it. So it took us about now we're about 2 hours into our hike in the morning. So it's light. It's probably 8 a.m., maybe 8:30 or so. No, I think it was a little later. I think it's 9. And now we're like, okay, now we got to start moving slow because like, we're getting closer to the area. And then of course that nice little morning little breeze starts coming. It's like, oh, okay, now we got to be worrying about the wind and where our scent's getting pushed around. And that's kind of one of the first things I noticed too is when we got off the glacier and we're starting going down the ridge where the goat is at below us, is the wind was going downhill. And I'm like, hey, it's morning. Isn't it supposed to be coming up? But it was coming right off the glacier. And so we kind of stopped a few times in our tracks. And it wasn't much. It was probably less than 5, but it was like, okay, we got to be very aware of what's going on right now and where stuff is getting pushed.
Especially of how spooky he was before, like any whiff of us, like just seeing his reaction to catching sight of us, almost a
Yeah.
mile away down valley the day before, he would have been up and been moving around for sure.
So are you discussing this? Are you whispering back and forth what the plan is? Are you still excited, confident, laughing, joking around,
No,
snacking on dehydrated elk? What are you doing?
It's getting serious. It's like
yeah,
whispering
it's good.
time, and like I'm like, wait, the wind is going not the way I thought we were gonna be going. So now we're like, just let's try to move slow. And as we're moving down the ridge, it's like each kind of little knob is like, okay, like we're getting a little closer, we're getting a little closer. And there was like a feature on that ridge line of like a highest point. There was two like highest points that I remember from the cross. And I was like, man, he's on the downhill side of that one of those little peaks. And so we're getting close. And so at this point, it was like, all right, let's drop our packs and get the rangefinder out, like the bino's ready.
Belly crawling up the hill.
Yeah. And I think we peeked over one edge thinking that maybe he was there, and that wasn't it. So we went a little bit farther. So when we dropped the packs, we looked over one edge and it's not there. And I think it was the next one we peeked over. You poked up and it was just like, I see white.
Yeah. And I mean, 150 yards. We had definitely had elevation on him, and he is looking the other way and just laying down just this beautiful ball of white, just magnificent, like, overseeing his mountaintop, layer, and overseeing the valley below and the bay below. Like, such a beautiful sight.
I've noticed that with mountain goats, once you get to that point, if you get to that point with a deer, like, okay, it's over. Just make the shot, it's over. But with a mountain goat, like every hunt I've been on, the first ever one was the guy shot it with a 300 Win Mag and just dropped it. And then it just got up again and just like, how in the world? Like it didn't know that it was supposed to be dead. And the guy airmails the second shot, third shot puts it back down again, and then it kind of slides down. So like when Abby was shooting her goat last year, I was like, be ready to use all three. Just start shooting at that thing because they're so stinking tough and they can just swallow up bullets. So were you confident with I'm just going to I got it. We're good to go here, or was like, man, these things are so stinking tough and I don't know where it's going to go. What was your lead in?
Um, I was feeling confident with the shooting position that I had and the width of the ridge that we were on. So it was high up there and very steep on both sides, but a wide enough feature that was like, okay, I'm got a shot at 150 yards. Like, this is a great vantage point, and we've got a good amount of space for him to be able to move around in without getting cliffed out immediately. But I know the reputation of goats, and so there's always that risk with them. And dang, as an animal, can they just like take lead and just keep moving? And some good foreshadowing for what happened next. I had
and he was laying down too.
Yeah.
And we started whispering, and I have had two animals now that we've shot laying down that didn't quite go as planned. And one of them being a goat, and then another one being a caribou. And it was like, okay. And I told her, I said,
no,
let's just wait for him to get up, because
yeah,
especially he was kind of facing away. He was facing away from us. And it was like, all right, let's not do that. Let's wait for him to get up. And so we're whispering at this point, and she's going to get in a position. I'm trying to get it like at a different vantage point. And this is when I also learned that even at 150 yards, whispering, goats can hear pretty well.
mm-hmm.
Well, that
That
could have
guy,
been a good tactic. It was a tactic to get it to
To get
stand
him to
up.
stand up.
People
Yeah.
do
well,
the rock throw and do those other things to get him to stand up.
Yep.
well,
Yeah.
she wasn't quite ready, but he flipped his head around and she is looking at him through her scope, and I like do not move. And so we had a stare off with this Billy for probably a full 60 seconds before he just flipped his head around and started looking back down valley.
Whoa.
And I was like, okay, now we're on borrowed time here. We gotta get ready because he's gonna flip his head around again. And that's what he did. And Marian was ready this time.
Yeah. Yeah. So he stood up and was able to fire off a shot and hit him, and he takes it and definitely stalls and kind of like this is back for a second, and then he moves towards the cliff, and I'm able to like get off another couple good shots, and we can see, I mean, he's got a lung shot, he's bleeding out the mouth, and he proceeds to move towards the cliff, kind of post up just below it for a second, and then just falls
Ooh.
just straight down it. And this was the cliff to the south. Our camp was to the north, and we knew like, okay, if he moves to the north, we'll be able to access it this way. If he falls that way, like that's towards camp, we felt good about it. But we watched him tumble. I mean, I like head first, ass over head
Oh,
a couple times, just sheer cliff before he went out of view into just the nastiest terrain. And it was just one of the worst sights that I have ever seen in my entire life.
brutal.
And I walked over to the edge and I looked over the cliff and I couldn't even look down. I got like sick. It was just like you couldn't see the bottom. All you could see was cliffs. And it kind of like all of a sudden it got real of like this didn't go as planned. We
Yeah.
thought he was gonna kill, like he was on this perfect bench. If he would have died right where he was at, or
Yeah.
even gone to the north, it would have been, but he went to the south and it was like, oh my God, what are we
And
doing?
just, I
Yeah.
mean, managed to cover like an impressive amount of terrain after taking like several well placed shots, and just, throw himself down the cliff. And it was awful.
So Mary and I had a moment. We like both
We did
got
have
a
a
little
moment.
emotional. It was
We
like,
did.
yeah, because it was just like this beautiful creature. And like I remember looking at the binos in him and just this October or like I guess late September, this beautiful hide. And Mary and I haven't done much goat hunting, but he looked big to me. I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is beautiful. And so to watch him kind of like just go off and was like, oh, this is like heartbreaking. I hope he is still together. I hope that we can like recover the meat. I hope he's not stuck in a cliff. So all these billion things are going through my mind, and I'm like, all right, let's go try to find this goat. Like
We're doing
go.
it.
Now,
Yeah.
like now we gotta put our big girl pants on and just go deal with this situation of what it is.
Yeah.
So
And I honestly didn't have much hope of him being recoverable from, just what the terrain we were looking to from above. And it was a very intense emotional moment for me. And I think that if it had turned out another way, it probably would have changed my relationship with hunting, because I don't think I could have forgiven myself from like taking the life of a beautiful animal in vain. And I tried to stay super positive. We're like, at first, like looking down this giant cliff, like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And then it's like, okay, we're mapping the route and we gotta try. Like, we don't know if we're gonna be able to do it, and we don't know what we're gonna find when we get there, but like we are gonna give it our all and see what we can find. And so like we have a plan. We're moving, down ridge to try to, route over to the valley to the south of us. and I'm like trying to stay positive, and then I like keep moving, and I just like have tears rolling down my face as we're trying to scout a route off this mountain that's not cliffed out and move into some very, very cliffy terrain. But I knew that as long as we weren't risking ourselves, that we had to give it everything we have. And I think that as a hunter, you kind of have to assess like what is risking your comfort level and what is risking your safety.
Mhm.
And Mel and I at that point were committed to risk, our comfort and give it everything that we had up until the point of risking the safety of our lives. And it was going to be super fucking tough, but we were going to go as far as we could to see if we could find him.
So are we still in the morning here, or are we early afternoon?
I think she shot him about 10:30 or so.
Mm-hmm.
So we pinned that spot, and I look on my good old maps, and I see that mountain face that he fell onto. I was like, huh. On my like pictures here, it looks pretty green and shrubby half most of the way up the mountain, which in my head was like, that's not a good sign. That means we got a lot of bushwhacking on steep terrain to do. And that's what we got into. So we came off the mountain there, got down, and got to where we could start side hilling at a like under those cliffs. And so we spent the next 3 hours digging through alders and some devil's club and raspberry bushes and all that fun stuff. And it was rotting too. So it's like,
Yeah.
Slippery and
Ferns as tall as we are that
yeah.
have died. And I mean, there's just like, there's nothing to hold on to in those stretches. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was tough.
There was a lot of falling. And I remember specifically Marian saying, how the hell are we going to get a goat out of here? And I was like, I don't know, Marian, but we got to find the goat first.
Yeah.
And all I kept, I was like, that my goal is like, we got to find the goat. We got to find the goat. And yeah. And then like also we're trying to like talk because like now we're seeing bear shit like everywhere. So
yeah. Lots of bear sign and like, yeah, just kind of a like progression of these crazy tall ferns that were rotting, and then Devil's Club, and then just a super thick band of alders. And then you get through the alders and you're like cliffed out. And there was a few different occasions where I'm like holding on to the alder to like shimmy down a bit of a cliff and like find a footing for my feet, and then cross a little bit of a scree field and then climb back up into the alders. And I'm just thinking like, we're doing this without weight. And like, if we have to pack a goat out through this, like this is going to be a serious challenge.
So we get to the shale chute that's like one before where we had pinned, and Marian goes like, we're getting close. And I was like, yeah, we are. And so we get to the shale chute right before where I thought it was. And I look up and there's a white thing on a cliff. And I was like, huh, that looks like a goat. So I pull up my binoculars and I was like, that's definitely a goat staring at us. And I was like, there's no way that is the goat. The goat that she shot it
Yeah.
has to be dead. And so I yelled at the goat and it moved its head and there was no blood. And I was like, all right, perfect. Thank God that's not the goat. I was like, oh, how is that thing alive? And why is it up on like a cliff? But so we continue past as this goat just stares and watches us struggle. And I pull into the next ravine, and Marian's like probably 50 yards behind me, and I look up and I see a white thing at like the base of the cliff but in the shale. And I just had a feeling, and I pulled up my binoculars and I see like feet, and I'm like, and I just screamed, Marian, I found the goat, and it's in a recoverable spot. That's like all I said. And she goes like, oh my God, it's dead. And I was just like, we just started like yelling. It was just
Oh my
like,
gosh,
oh my God,
freaking
we
out.
actually found it. And it's not stuck on the cliff.
Yeah.
And it was just like this such a sense of relief of like, it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Just the relief in that moment. And, you know, as a hunter, this is the first time that I've ever had an animal, like had to, you know, track an animal that I had shot already. And I was very much used to the like elation of like getting an animal down on the first shot. And so to just like have the intensity of that moment when he fell and just the like emotional, like pure emotional distress of that, and then add several hours of really like intense physical effort on top of that, like I'm feeling drained physically and emotionally at this point, and just hear her yelling, you know, and the fact that he was there and we could recover him, and that like I don't think I've ever felt such a sense of relief in my life before.
Yeah, relief is an interesting feeling to have when you're hunting because, like you said, it's typically like a euphoric experience. Everything
Mm-hmm.
worked out, you head over there, or at least if it didn't work out, it things worked themselves out within a pretty short period of time. But that amount of
Mm-hmm.
suspense, yeah,
Yeah.
relief is it's a good feeling to have, but it's not the one that you're looking for when you're going
No.
hunting.
Yeah.
No.
And like that adrenaline, like all of a sudden I got like this third wind of energy, and I was just like running up the mountain with my pack on, like, is it really there? Is that it? And uh Marion, like the first thing Marion, I was like, okay, well, we can't quite start the way it was positioned and like on this, like it was still in this really steep shale. I was like, okay, should we take a picture here before we get started? And she's like, yeah. So I said, let's position it so it's flat, or like, set up her photo. And she goes to move it, and this thing just starts rolling down the shale. And I said, okay, well, I guess we're gonna take the picture down there.
He wasn't done moving.
Yeah, so much for moving.
He had the last word.
And, and also I realized at that moment too, I was like, man, this is kind of a big goat. Like we got some work cut out for us.
Yeah, he did.
So we're still, you got plenty of daylight though, right? Are you starting to worry about getting everything back to camp by the time it's getting dark, or are you just moving forward?
Um, let's see, I think it was about 3 now. Maybe it was 2, no, maybe it was 2:30ish, like two between 2 and 3. So I was like, okay, we still have several hours of daylight. But as we were hiking to get to the goat, we were trying to kind of consider, if we went down and then followed this river out, it would put us in Seward. And we were like, well, that's an option. But then the more we thought about it, she texted a friend and asked about that who lives in Seward. And he's like, there's a lot of bears down there. Be careful. It's definitely doable. And then I think immediately both of us were like, no, we're not doing that. Especially in the dark, trading a route that we didn't know.
Mhm.
And then also just being like brown bears being a factor down there. It's like, okay, let's not do that. So
Yeah.
we decided, I was like, okay, we're just gonna go back to camp, but we got to take care of this and process it, and also getting back through that bushwhacking with weight is gonna take us a while. And also a factor is we knew that the weather was gonna change, and just about when we got to the goat, I think actually that morning it had like snowed a little bit or something. It like a snow, yeah, it snowed a little bit,
Kind
but
of.
just when we got to the the goat, you could see the visibility and like the precipitation coming. It was like, okay, all right, we're gonna get wet now. And so we knew that we were kind of at the end of the afternoon, that we needed to not, dink around, but at the same time, I was like, we have time to kind of take care of this. And then it started to pour.
Hmm.
And then the wind started coming. So we started field dressing the goat, trying to be as efficient as possible. Um, Luckily, only one shoulder was pretty beat up. That I was impressive how much that coat and fur really helped protect a lot of that meat. Um,
Yeah, like
but
I would say 90% of the meat was salvageable.
Hmm.
That front shoulder, there were some pieces that we had to cut around, but yeah, I was very, very pleased to see that.
What did you
because
have gear wise? Not to cut you off about the meat thing there, but when you're getting this rain, you're hiking around a lot. Sometimes you want to wear thinner type stuff that's light and breathable, just because you're moving around a lot. Stuff that's a little bit heavier is going to trap in that heat. And you're going to get really dehydrated really quick. So, what did you have gear wise, rain gear?
I've been wearing the Sitka rain gear for the last couple of years, and I've been really happy with that. Um,
Mhm.
Oftentimes, if I'm like working pretty hard hiking and we're moving quite a bit, I just end up having like long johns and then the rain gear on, um, because I'm otherwise I get too hot. But yeah, I had the Sitka rain gear on both top and bottom.
Yeah, same. And light layers underneath and some like additional layers packed away. But part of our kind of decision making when we were picking the route to go back was like, well, if we have to, go back the way we came, it's really going to suck. But we know where camp is and we know we have got warm, dry layers. Like
Mhm.
we're getting poured on. And that kind of rain, even with the best rain gear, you're getting wet. And
Yeah.
especially when you're moving through brush, that's all around you. It's just unavoidable that that's going to get underneath your rain gear and soak your underlayers. And we were like, well, this route, it looks better. It looks like it would be a much more pleasant pack out, but we don't fully know that. And we both recognized that with the weather that moved in, even though we had some warmer layers packed away, that if we were to be in a position where we couldn't get out that night, it would move from that level of what is comfortable to that level of what is safe pretty
Mhm.
quickly. And could very easily turn pretty consequential when at that point where we were like wet and cold and tired, but it was still, enough to like be safe.
Mhm.
And I have to say that probably disappointed my dad a little bit because both Marion and I did not bring our fishing blue gloves that are nice and waterproof. Had both weak gloves, like I think I had like these little puppy REI ones, and so we just got absolutely soaked. And why we started dealing with the goat because it starts pouring pretty hard, and we have she's got the tarp out, so we're like putting one quarter in under it for each time and trying to keep the meat dry. We were just so focused on keeping the meat dry, everything else just got soaked, like our backpacks and all that kind of stuff. So at this point now it's like, all right, we're wet, we gotta go, we don't care, but we're like, this is what's happening. And so we're still riding the high pretty much of like we got the goat. And yeah, we we get our pictures in the alders with the goat, and now it's like, okay, now it's time to venture back through this brush that we thought was hard 3 hours ago, but it's going to be even hard now when we got 70 pounds on our back. Um, so yeah, there was a lot of falling that next couple hours, a lot of falling. And I remember going up this steep section, and it was like it's like the sand that you take one step up and then you fall 3 steps backwards. And it took us probably a half an hour to get up 50 feet. It was terrible. And I just remember being like, man, did we sign up for this? Yep, we sure did.
What was the mine mind frame, because sometimes if you get too frustrated and you kind of redline, like you're the emotions get the best of you. You get so angry that then you can kind of just get depressed. So when people talk about mindset,
Mhm.
you're going to be frustrated, but just kind of staying calm, getting through things and staying
Yeah.
even, maybe yellow, maybe a little orange, but keeping from getting redline where you get too frustrated. Were you trying to tell each other jokes, or were you just kind of quiet and getting through it? Because I'm not really a joke type person. If someone tries to cheer me up with a joke, I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't need that right now. I just need quiet. I just need to
Yeah.
handle this.
We
I,
we stayed pretty dang positive, I
we
gotta say.
did, you know,
Yeah.
and I feel like that 3 hours of us not knowing that we had to go and that like that was like the part that was like the most negative. That it was like, man, everything else is positive after this, like even if it's miserable. Um,
Yeah. We were pretty quiet during
yeah,
that stretch. Like
yeah,
once like, we saw him fall and then like kind of we were like talked through the route. I was like trying to stay positive. But then when we got into the like real schwacky, difficult stuff, like it was just kind of bare minimum communication of like, where are you? What does it look like? And but after we found him, um, I mean, we were definitely just down to business to dress him because it's just pouring rain and like we know we have a lot of effort ahead of us. And so we get that done, as quickly and economically as possible. And then when we start packing out, um, it's tough, but like spirits were high, and like Mel starts like bumping music, and we're sitting.
I got another set of win. I started playing some tunes from like back when I was in high school, and it just like I was singing. We were trying to keep bears away.
Right.
uh,
Yeah, it was pretty like all of a sudden I was having fun again. I was like, this is great. And I
mhm.
remember like one of my good mantras out there when I'm in the woods is like when it's getting hard and I like kind of a little bit miserable, I'm like, you chose to be here. Like this is like all by choice. So I just like try to remind myself of like, yeah, like this is something like you put yourself in a situation, you want to be here and you chose to be here. So even when it's hard, it's like,
Mhm.
yeah. So
That used
I
to
think
be just be the way. But before halibut sandwiches in downtown Anchorage, this used to be just the way. So yeah, it's kind of reach back into that DNA a little bit and make it work.
yeah,
So how long
yeah.
did it take you to get back to camp?
um so let's see, I think it took us
We got
maybe.
there right at dark, I think.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
so
not
I
bad.
think by the time that we left, it was about maybe 4 or so. And we get back through just the, you know, horrendous bushwhack on the south side of the slope. And, camp is around to the north, and we have to like cut across this ridge and then move up valley a little bit because it gets super cliffed out, and then get on the north side of the creek that's causing those cliffs, and that's where camp is. And so we started to come around um, as it's getting later in the evening, and we're maybe like an hour and a half out from sunset, and we finally get out of off that south facing ridge and back to the normal like lichen and low bush blueberry bushes and that typical kind of like high alpine vegetation that you're used to. We're like, oh, this is like delightful terrain to watch. We're still side hilling like crazy, but at least we're not bushwhacking. And then we get hit with 20-mile-per-hour gusts
Mm.
coming straight off the glacier. It's still pouring rain, and the rain is just directly in our faces with that 20-mile-per-hour wind, and we're
It was like
exhausted.
southeast Alaska winds and like blowing sideways. And we rounded that corner into that valley. I was like, ooh, this is just like you're almost there type of thing. And
Yeah, that are like, oh, just when we thought things were gonna get easier because we're
yeah,
getting out of real crap to rain. It's like, oh, we
like
have the weather, and it was like I was so tired at that point, and I was, kind of like taking a few steps and then like pausing for a second, and then I would get cold because we are soaked. And like Mel said, we forgot our waterproof gloves and our hasty like midweek, let's hunt this weekend plan making. And like my hands are numb and I'm exhausted and just taking it one step at a time. But spirits were still high. It never bled into like the type 3 fun where it's like it's really never fun. It was like solidly like type 2, but like, well, this kind of sucks, but also this is still pretty awesome. And like as soon as we're warm and dry again, this is just gonna be fantastic.
Yeah, we're gonna make it. It's gonna be
Yeah.
fine,
Yeah.
but it's gonna be horrible.
Yeah.
And I was just like, the wind is now picking up more, and I'm like, man, I hope our tent does okay over here. Like we're going light, so we brought our little backpacking 2.5 pound tent, and we were in a nice protected area, but it's also like this is not the type of tent you want in strong wind. So I'm like, I really hope we get back to our tent, doing okay. And we made our way back to the tent. Everything is just soaking wet, and now we start standing around for a few minutes trying to get everything out, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, we're getting kind of cold. So we luckily had these perfect hemlocks surrounding our tent that were pretty dry, and it had been raining for hours, but they were dry under it, so it was perfect. So we got the meat hung up in the hemlocks, and then it was time to have dinner in bed because we were cold and wet. So we made that happen pretty quick.
Everything in the tent was still dry though?
Yep.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, we were dry in there, and Mel was like, "What do you think about going out tonight?" Because we had like another like couple miles and like 2,000 feet of elevation loss to conceivably pack out, but also the creek crossing at the bottom is very much weather dependent. And I was like, it's not going to be a super fun night. Like it's super gusty and it's supposed to get windier, but like we've got dry clothes, we've got hot food, like we hung the meat. I'm like, let's, I don't want to have us be moving down that in the dark and not be able to cross it. And it was like, I'm pretty exhausted. I don't want to risk injury, trying to lose that much elevation when I'm pretty tired. And so, we very quickly got the meat hung, wrung out the clothes that we had on, thankfully had dry clothes in the tent, piled in for the night. I'm like, screw it. I'm eating in the tent. I'm like, we've got 60 pounds of meat hanging like 150 yards from our tent. A bear's coming, it's going for that. Not, I had these like great enchiladas that Mel's husband made in the tent a couple hours.
I made those ones.
Oh, you did? Oh, sorry.
Credit.
Yeah, so we climbed in, and thankfully we're warm in the tent, but had wind gusts. I think the strongest gusts that night were like 40 miles per hour. Just had those ripping through till about maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't a super restful night, that's for sure.
But like you said, dry, and then you can
Dry.
kind of refocus for the next day.
Yeah, and the tent held up. It didn't break on us. It definitely bent a few times, and we were worried it was going to happen, but stayed strong.
And I tend to be like a little bit of just sometimes of a warrior at night, and especially since the wind was howling so bad and we had that meat right there next to us, I was like, man, I'm not gonna be able to hear anything if it's getting into our meat. So I laid there like tossed and turned with my rifle sitting there loaded, and I was like, Marian, I'm ready if anything's coming, but we're not gonna be able to hear it until it's like on top of us. But yeah, we had no problems. And we woke up the next morning, and even though it had rained most of the night, that wind blowing through the hemlocks, like our game bags were super dry and like had like crisp on them already. It was pretty cool. Everything, all our packs, like I had hung out some of my stuff and that had dried out. So it was nice. Like waking up the next morning, it was still a little windy, but it hadn't started raining. And it was like, all right, fresh start. And we only have to go downhill from here. So
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you got out pretty uneventful on that last little bit out, especially compared to the day before.
Yep, lots of Devil's Club got stuck in my hand though, because on the downhill the stuff is just as slippery, and we had like all this weight on our back, and yeah, there was like I was definitely picking Devil's Club out of my hands like for the next 3 days at work.
Yeah. I
But
just
Yeah.
like covered in bruise. Like when I got home, I was like, oh wow, I don't think I've had so many bruises on my body in my entire life. Just like legs and arms were covered. And I spent a good amount. Some of the steepest step, like the steepest, gully that we had to get through that, had that bit of a trail through it, but just nothing to hold on to, just, rotten ferns and devil's club. I'm just sliding like at that point.
my $400 rain gear.
Like, pack and it's like, all right, I'm just going down on my butt for some of
I,
these stretches.
I tempted to walk and I'd fall and then I'd laugh because it was funny and it kind of hurt. Whatever.
So when you get home and your husband's ask, so how's the hunt? Like, oh, fine, just got a goat, no big deal. Like, how much did you tell them? Do you hold back? Are they like head shakers? They expect those sort of adventures if you're going out with Melissa. Like, what's that like when you get home?
Well, I think those sort of adventures of Melissa are definitely implied a bit. Yeah, I had messaged my husband right after I shot it. It was like Billy down and I don't think's recoverable. And then he was freaking out for the rest of the day. And he was actually on a work trip in Southeast. And so he's just, like anxiously awaiting, the next update and freaking out and wondering like, are we gonna find him? Are we gonna be okay? And so he got a play by play, as much as I could. And then as soon as I shot him, as soon as I found him, he got messages letting him know what was going on.
Play-by-plays are weird because if you update from that moment, hey, we shot it, haven't found it yet, then you just create so much suspense and the person's just kind of
Yeah.
waiting.
Yeah.
My buddy Harrison was up on a caribou hunt and it was a fly out and it was a long fly out and the old timer that took him was like, no cell phones, no in reach, no anything. So he's just going hunting and no one will see or hear from him for the entire duration of the hunt. And he felt that it was somewhat like freeing in that you didn't have to worry about check-in, but you also don't get to share the moment. And then the
Yeah.
people back at home don't know anything. So it's kind of a weird dynamic. You want to share, you're super excited. You send the in reach or the text if you have service, but then it
Mhm.
creates the suspense. And I don't know, it's just an interesting modern dynamic, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Totally. Yeah. It's and we had like a little bit of cell phone service up there in areas, so that did kind of create this like we're hunting, we shouldn't have service. How is this possible? To check in, but yeah, I kind of can see that where it's like everyone at home is like, what's going on?
Yeah,
Mhm.
sending more text message than you probably should, but yeah, it
Yeah,
is nice to have that. It is nice to have
yeah,
just in case you need something, you're in reach or this or that. It's nice to have that because it
Yeah.
exists, so you might as well use it.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
definitely.
did you have a big celebration afterwards? Did you get together and have some backstrap or some steaks or something and retell the story?
We had that dinner last night actually. So we make it back to town. My husband's on a work trip. Mel's husband makes us a delicious dinner and comes over and we're just cutting meat all night and we get through the majority of it. Um, and then it took a little bit to schedule the celebratory dinner, but last night I made a curry with the backstrap, and the four of us were all able to like get together and share that delicious meal, and that was really nice.
Nice. Excellent.
Yeah, the because of the fall, his intestines and stuff kind of got distributed on some of the stuff. So we wanted to get that meat taken care of pretty quick to get it cleaned up.
Hmm.
And yeah, nothing like her husband being out of town to be like, all right, well, John, we need help because we need to get this taken
Yeah.
like quickly because we don't want this meat to go bad. And yeah, we got it taken care of. And then it was like back to work the next day, and I was like, whoa, that was an eventful weekend.
Yeah, the idea of a weekend hunt, and that's what we have to do a lot up here. A lot of people from down south come up and they have 7 days minimum, usually 10 days, 2 weeks to be able to really make the trip work. So when
Mhm.
you talk about a a day trip for alpine deer or for a weekend trip for mountain goat. It just seems so bizarre. But if you have that weather window, you hit the weather window, and whatever needs to happen happens. And because you got
Mhm.
work on the in Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was trying, the having to go with a plan B kind of so late in the season. I was recognizing like Mel, had already hunted sheep and caribou where she was out for a longer period of time. Like she has to work. So I was trying to fit in, kind of longer weekends with people where I could, knowing that it was going to be difficult to find somebody to, be able to commit to a longer stretch of time. And thankfully with that tag being, pretty accessible from where I live, like it allowed for that, where a lot of other places that just wouldn't have been the option. But we also were out there a day longer than we kind of thought we were. And Mel had that Monday off, and I'm messaging my boss at like 9 p.m. from a mountaintop, like, not gonna be at work tomorrow. Need another day to pack this goat and myself off the mountain, and I'll see you on Tuesday.
That's an Alaska thing right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So
And it's so
what do you got? Go ahead, Melissa.
Oh, I was just talking about like the weekend thing. Like it's nice because it can like, it's a weather weekend. Let's like go do this because we have the window. But also sometimes it adds like a little bit of stress because like, you're trying to trying to move really efficiently in the mountains. And when you're after like these animals, it's like not a lot of this terrain is just doable like that. So I feel like we did kind of get lucky up to where everything worked out where we could make it happen in that weekend stretch. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not every hunt is like that because like, yeah, I feel
And
like
we also brought extra food, recognizing like we went in super light, but we're like, we need to be prepared if we need to spend, another day or two out here. And I'm glad that we did because we needed it.
yeah.
Yeah. So closing thoughts. Any things about hunting or adventure or inspiring thoughts or mountain goat curry recipes, anything?
Well, I'll just say, Mel and I spent a lot of time kind of talking through the choices that we made and what happened as a consequence of them. Would we make those same choices in the future? If we could redo it, what would we do differently? And I think that anytime you hunt, it's an opportunity to both get better as a hunter, but also kind of just grow as a human. And I feel like this hunt really embodied so many of those things where we were able to evaluate what we did and, the areas that we want to like focus on as hunters and grow. And then just being, kind of put through the ringer physically and emotionally, like you learn a lot about yourself. And in any other situation where you probably would have like given up and not pushed that hard, but in this situation we felt like we didn't really have the choice to do that. It just, it reveals a lot about yourself. And so I feel like it was such a valuable experience in that regard. And like, yeah, it would have been amazing if he didn't jump off a cliff and he went down where I shot him and I had the perfect ridge top photo and this beautiful hide to like adorn the back of my couch. But if that would have happened, I don't think that experience would have made me grown as a hunter or a human. And just, what we went through together, it did make me grow so much. And I think also just like deepened the bonds of our friendship. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, but just like having that experience together, like, I don't know, there's kind of nothing else that compares to the kind of like teamwork that you have to do on a hunt like that. And so as much as I, would have loved for things to go differently, I'm honestly like very, very grateful to have had that experience with Mel and like had that experience myself.
Pop that,
Yeah.
Melissa.
Well said. I know. Yeah. Yeah. This was my third hunt of the year. I did the sheep hunt and the caribou hunt and then this one. And this year was a hard year for me because every single animal was similar situation. It fell, it was injured, it didn't die right away. And that was really hard on me. And none of them, even though even I wasn't even the shooter in any of them, but that is like hard because it it just is different. And the past hunts last year, I got super lucky and had a great year. And so this year was really hard on me emotionally. And so it definitely put things into perspective and it made me like pick out things that I could have done to help improve the situations. And so I learned a lot this year. And I uh, also realized that like hunting can be pretty emotional. Like I don't know,
Mhm.
except for other people, but I had to remind Marian and I that like when the goat situation happened, we both did get emotional, and it was like that's coming from a place of being an ethical hunter and just like
Mhm.
letting that happen, and that's okay to be upset because of what happened. So
Mhm.
yeah, I learned a lot this year, and I'm excited and excited to get back out there for next year. And yeah, some new adventures on the books I think would be going to some new places. I um, haven't been to the Brooks Range, and I am just dying to get up there. And then also, I think I'm gonna come back home for some alpine deer hunting. I've missed that, so that's on the deck for next year.
Yeah, you do it a lot, but it's never the same. And you talk about that emotion, and sometimes you never really sure why it hits you when it does. Just something about the context, the way things happen, who you're with, other things going on in your life. Then all of a sudden, it's makes you very grateful, makes you very something. But
Yeah,
yeah, if you ever lose that, like that's something I don't think I ever will. I don't know
yeah,
why I would, but the people who it's just a matter of, just another head on the wall, another no big deal. Like that must
definitely.
be a scary place to be.
Yeah, and I think that all three of us here in this podcast, like our relationship with hunting is like rooted in so much more than just the harvest, and it's like such a pure connection with nature. It's having these experiences, incredibly beautiful places with people who we really love and are very close to us, and it's challenging ourselves. And when you come at it from that angle, there is such a high emotional element of it. And like I'm proud of the fact that we all like care so much and take something like the situation that Mel and I got ourselves in like so very seriously. And when I was sharing this story with friends and including like a longtime hunter who I really respect, he said like so many people would have looked down that cliff and they wouldn't even have tried. They would have called it at that point. And so just like the fact that like we cared enough that we were going to do everything in our power to ensure that that like beautiful animal did not die in vain, and that was not going to be something that was okay on either one of our conscious, for a lifetime beyond that. Like I'm proud of that, and I'm really grateful that I had a super strong hunting partner who could help, guide me through a shitty situation to like make sure that we did do everything in our power to like have an ethical hunt and harvest that Billy and bring him home.
Yeah, it's when you talk about conservation, you talk about using the resources. Like that's the thing that the people who are the biggest advocates are the ones who engage in hunting or fishing. There are people who are very maybe anti-hunting because they love animals, but it's this abstract sort of idea that you get from inside your house and you don't see the animals, you don't
Mhm.
know the value in the hunting experience and what you get from the hunting experience. And fishing, same thing. The advocates that you have are people who are users of it. And you just want other people to have that experience going forward, not just that they exist in the abstract, but you can go there and you can fish in these places because there's habitat for the fish. You can go there and there's going to be caribou hunts and you can go and you can experience that. You can go on a mountain goat hunt or whatever it is. And that's why there's the advocates in the conservation realm rather than the preservation realm. And the preservation
Mhm.
people have their hearts in the right spot, but just the people can talk so much more passionately when you're like, I have to have these experiences again. And I want other people to be able to have those too, because there's nothing at all that compares to it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very well said.
absolutely.
All right. Well, I think the wife has the baby to get to bed, so I think I was able to skip out on that thing. But appreciate you being on here. It's always great to talk to you too, and glad things worked out. And always have epic stories. Maybe next year you'll have just a decent story and
I hope
nice weather and easy
Yeah,
and
I think I used up my easy one somewhere because now I'm paying for it.
seems like yeah. But
Hey,
thanks again.
before you go, what's your next thing, Jeff?
We're gonna try to get out deer hunting this year. Abby, she went out today. I was home with the baby and she just went up the hill behind the house. I think we talked about this before I was pressing record, but I took care of the baby and was writing a letter of recommendation for a student while she went up the hill behind the house and she shot a spike. So it makes it a little bit interesting shuffling. I had to put the baby in the car seat, and she hates that just for the short little drive to get to the bottom of the hill. So Abby could then drive the baby home, and so I could go up there and get the deer. So those sort of things. We won't be able to hunt together, which is too bad. We really like hunting together, but we'll at least make it work. And it's nice that she can get out, and that's actually the first buck that she shot by herself. So that was a pretty cool
Are you
experience for
proud
her.
husband? My gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super excited.
Like
Super excited.
that. That's
what
awesome.
what a force, just
Yeah.
Yeah.
giving birth and doing a solo hunt in 1 month.
Yeah,
Wow.
because she gutted it and started dragging it down the hill, and it gets pretty steep. And I was like, "That's fine. I'll go up there and I'll take care of it." You know, you're 4 weeks
Mhm.
out of giving birth. You know, so yeah,
Yeah.
it's you should not feel bad about it. So got it home, hung it, and then she took care of the rest of it. So
That's
yeah,
awesome. Well, tell
so
her congratulations because that's really badass.
yeah,
Yeah.
will do. Will do.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, just deer hunting and then steelhead fishing when they start coming in. So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice.
Mhm.
Dragging the new little girl along for all the adventures, right?
Got to. Got to.
Yeah.
That's one of the promises we made to ourselves with that we didn't want, obviously things are gonna change, but we didn't want to be the type who like, oh, it's too much of a hassle to put the baby in the car seat to go on a different walk or to take her to Walmart or take her to whatever. So we want to get her out, do our own things, and make everything as normal as possible and involve her in our adventures. So see
Nice.
how that goes.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure mom, I don't know if it was me or my sister. My mom, we were like a month or two old. My mom went out and with my dad, and I think we were put to the side. My mom shot the deer, and then baby slept through the gunshot. So I was like, all right, baby can do this.
Yeah, there you go. Establish that as the norm, and
Yeah,
then
right?
we
Yep.
won't have to do any sort of convincing. This is just what happens.
Yeah,
Mhm. Love
exactly.
Yeah.
that.
Well, thanks for having
Thanks.
us, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And have a good rest of your fall and have a nice winter.
Yeah, you too.
You too.